Audio speeding.
Action.
In a world where machines have become creative and redesigned by algorithm, there's only one thing that can save the human race. Blow up.
Just go to this panel at Masters and Robots.
I guarantee you that's a much less violent way to do it.
Well, we're going to save humanity today by talking about artificial intelligence. And you can tell me at the end whether we're actually going to save it or destroy it. But hopefully I'll make a convincing argument for one of them. We're at an inflection point with technology and creativity. And artificial intelligence has done more to influence the tools that we have available to us today, and I'm going to show you many demonstrations of what's to come next and how that'll influence not just the things that we see and consume, but the things that we create. And I want to start off with a controversial example of deepfakes. Deepfakes are something most of us have seen. They're examples of swapping a face onto somebody else and essentially misrepresenting yourself. But this was the inflection point for a lot of the technology I'm going to talk about, as it involved machine learning, machine vision, and machine manipulation and automation of many of these technologies. So this was essentially the birthplace for a lot of what you're going to see, from avatars and representation to augmented reality. And I had a great conversation.
Oh, and good luck on your South by Southwest submission, Ian. What's it about?
Oh yeah, thanks. I'm going to be talking about synthetic media.
So the former presidents were really excited about my talk. So they were really trying to hype me up for this. Oh, thank you. I'm sure they're excited for the applause too. But essentially, the synthetic media, as I mentioned on the video, is anything that is wholly generated or manipulated by an algorithm, which is a lot of what you're going to see. And it's going to be a lot. It's going to be coming at you fast. So I recommend.
Listen carefully. After this, there is no turning back. Stay with me and take the red pill, and we'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
It goes deep. So we're going to take this bit by bit, bite by bite. And I want to start with avatars. I talked earlier about representations of people. You know, deep fakes are a representation of us. And with this technology, we're able to advance the representation of ourselves in the virtual worlds. We heard Martin and Rich talk about the metaverse and the coming mixed realities and extended realities that we're going to be living in the future. And avatars are going to be a very important part of that future. It's our representation and how we project ourselves to those virtual, extended, and even real worlds. So understanding the technology behind how we make avatars, how we represent ourselves, is important. And there have been some major advances around that. What you see here is an example of me building an avatar for myself, but this is actually using machine vision based on one single two-dimensional image of myself looking like this. And what it does is it takes that image and it creates a 3D model of myself. And from there, I have to texture it to make it look like me with my jacket, my clothing. But what comes out is a pretty convincing video game-like model of myself. It's three-dimensional. It can be dropped into different contexts, video games, different worlds. And then eventually, I can start to animate it. I can have it do certain things. I can have it dance. I can have it move. So right now, we're essentially giving that life. It's moving, looks pretty realistic. Let's give it a little more pizzazz. Let's have it do the moonwalk. There it is. And yeah, that's about how awkward I look when I try and do the moonwalk. Beyond that, though, I can actually take that and put it into real-world situations like you see here. This is me introducing my new model, and it actually has quite a fun personality. It thinks it can move. It obviously thinks it's way more attractive than me. But this is also, since it's a 3D model, I can put it into different contexts. This is virtualized. Now, what about putting it into the real world? It's obviously very frightened of the real world. But this 3D model has just been placed there, and I can also control this. I can put it into movement, have it dance. This guy has way better dance moves than I do. You'll see in a couple of seconds. But this is kind of the first iteration of a model produced, this is 2 years ago now. So he's doing a little soft shoe. He's got some good moves. I don't know what he's listening to, but I'd love to hear it. And this is really interesting stuff because there's a lot of advances around machine vision that brought us here. But there was still a lot of manual manipulation that got us there. We had the 3D model, which the machine vision created, or the algorithm created, but I had to texture it. I had to make it really look like me after that was done. What if artificial intelligence could take us even further and take care of more of that work for us? Well, it would look a little bit like this. This is one of my partners at the studio taking a bunch of photos of me, and those photos are going to be stitched together to create a representation that is incredibly realistic. And rather than just using that blank 3D model you saw at the beginning of the other video, it's now going to use this representation that looks like this. And that's just taken from a bunch of photos of me. And all of a sudden, it's all from the phone, creates this mesh that is realistic. I can take this and I can put it on a 3D model to create something that looks a little bit more realistic than the last model you'll see. You tell me. How's it look? I'd say it's pretty close. With these types of models, I can throw these into game engines like Unreal Engine, which powers most of the video games that you see today. And they're eating Hollywood. The Mandalorian, if any of you have seen that, or half the movies that are being produced by Disney today, are produced using video game engines. And these types of characters can easily be dropped into these types of contexts. The metaverse will also be heavily powered by game engines. So as we move to more realistic 3D style avatars, these are easily placed in different locations. To take things even further with realism are Samsung Neons.
I am the only human on this set. They are not real. They are computationally generated in real time.
So what that means is they're actually being generated by a machine in real time. Means it's not pre-scripted. It means that they're not generated in a way that you already know what's going to happen, but they're completely artificial. And you see the movements, the human likeness, all of that is designed by algorithm. It's not the deep fake you saw a moment ago. The whole being itself is generated by AI. And these are powered by incredibly powerful machines, about $25,000 to run one of these on a computer. But they're getting to the point where you actually can't even tell the difference between myself or any of the other avatars on screen. And you're likely to see one of these at the airport, helping you find your plane, or as a concierge for customer service. They're going to be the interface between you and companies and brands and metaverse experiences going forward. So having these on screen is nice, but what about taking these avatars and putting them in the real world around us in ways that we can also interact with them? Well, this example from the world's League of Legends is actually from 2018. And it's an example of a pop group called KDA performing live on stage mixed with other artists. This is essentially the opening ceremonies for an esports tournament. Kind of starts to rival the Olympics. If I knew esports were going to be like this when I was a kid, I would have told my parents, yes, I need 5 more hours on the Sega Genesis. Needless to say, things have come quite a long way since the 90s. And these are avatars, again, being dropped into these performances. They're being controlled by humans using those motion-controlled suits. You saw some examples in Martin's videos of that type of motion control system, but the avatars themselves are now the representation of that movement on stage in a remote location. Really cool stuff. So I thought it wasn't fair that these avatars get to have all the fun. I wanted to join them and say, I can do the same thing. So I worked with a company called Hour One. Flew to New York and had them record me for 2 hours talking to a screen so they could learn with algorithms and machine learning how my face looks when it talks, how my body moves when it talks, so that I could start to create my own avatars and also create new content with it, regardless of whether I'm in front of a camera or not. And now I can get up and create content without having to get out of my pajamas. It's really nice. I don't have to get in front of a camera or put makeup on. And it looks like this. Well, it will look like this. I think my clicker might have lost some reception, so hold, please. Do we have any technical difficulty music we can play? The algorithms are angry.
Thanks,
Yep, there we
Roxy.
go.
The digital fashion world made a lot of noise with several important stories this week. Artifact, one of the most dominant Web3 studios, is launching a new line of accessories in their latest strip. Artifact is the driving force behind Nike's dominance in NFTs, making them the highest-grossing brand investing in the metaverse.
So I just wrote that script. It took me about 30 minutes to write the content. I found the B-roll and the footage that I wanted to put into this experience, and then the algorithm generated the rest. It already knew what I look like when I talk. Obviously, that's not my voice. And then it speaks for me. And now I can produce the news from my laptop in pajamas. What's beautiful about this is I can also scale this. Let's say I want to take that report and I want to send it to a place where I don't speak the language. Well, I can also do that as well because all of this is synthesized using algorithms.
Thanks, Roxy.
Thanks, Roxy. The digital fashion world made a lot of noise with several important stories this
Several important stories. He sounds way better than I do doing that. But there's a lot going on behind all this. So how do we get here? I'm going to take us way, way, way back to the 1700s. They had some really cool algorithms back then. And talk about how humans see the world and how machines see the world. And there's a lot of similarities in the way that we learn about the world around us. First of all, we try and create order out of chaos in order to understand things. We need to make things legible in order for us to read them, understand them, and then be able to create with them. So the reason I have a photo of a forest is because in the 1700s was the birth of scientific forestry. And what this was all about was humans' attempt to control and understand nature. We needed to be able to understand how the forests were essentially not just designed, but we're using it as a resource. We use it for lumber, we use it for habitation, we used it for all sorts of things in our lives, and we need to know how much was there, what was the health of it, what was the status of it, but we can't really measure things unless there's a standard of measurement, unless there's data that we can see and understand, and it's structured. So we took nature, and we said, no, we know better. We're going to change the way you operate so that we can read you. And we did that. And now you can see these forests that are beautiful rows of trees for miles. They're all in a singular line. They're all of one type of tree so that you can measure and see what kind of, how many of that tree that you have. They cleared all the brush. They got rid of all the things that weren't necessary for counting. And what they did is they cleaned the data. And as a result of that, they could understand the forest, they could count, they could see how much was being pulled in and how much was there, what was the health of the forest. Now, the world itself is legible to human beings. Machines do something similar, and in order for machines to understand the world, they have to have data. They have to have ways to learn about it. And if we don't have ways to learn about the world, then those machines and algorithms can't manipulate the world. It'll be important for the machines to understand the world so that we can overlay experiences onto them and even have interactive, virtual, augmented, and extended realities. Here you have some examples of information being displayed and painted on the world. If the machines can't understand what is in front of it, it can't project anything onto it. So with a basic understanding of machines and how they understand the world, let's talk about how they create for the world. And we'll talk about generative AI. With this specific example of how they understand things, there is a lot of effort to get machines to understand vision, machine vision. And you can actually train them by giving them captions and giving them images themselves. So this is actually part of a image-to-text translation algorithm. So it understands that the image on the left is a man in black shirt is playing guitar. Very descriptive. It had to get a lot of training to get here, but you'll see why this is important in a moment when we get to creating things. Because if it can't understand it, make it legible, it can't create for it. Construction worker in an orange safety vest working on the road, it's understanding that there's a road here. He sees the construction worker. The construction worker is contextual. How would it know that just because of the vest it's a construction worker? Well, it's understanding all the context of the things that's around the person in this image and making assumptions based on the associations that it has created based on billions and billions of data points. The reason I'm taking you through this is because the next evolution, once you understand the world, is start to create for it. And in 2016, a group of scientists decided, what if we could take the algorithms that take images and tell us what they are and reverse that process and say what I want the machine to create and have it create that. Okay, little odd. Stop sign flying in blue skies. Rather fantasy-like, right? But if you look at this, I'm creating a prompt, and all of a sudden a machine is creating something based on what it thinks I'm looking for. That's obviously a stop sign-ish. It might look more like a red blood cell, but it's close. And the sky, yeah, there are blue things with white things that might look like clouds. These boxes were 32 by 32 pixels. They were tiny. So you really couldn't do much with these, but at least you could see that the machines know what you're trying to get them to do. And that was a massive breakthrough. Write something down and have the machine create it for you. That was 2016. Welcome to today. This is a work of art generated completely by artificial intelligence from a prompt from an AI artist. Jason Allen produced this several weeks ago and won first place in the digital art competition at the Colorado State Fair. The first time that we know of that an artificially intelligent machine, or a machine, won in an art competition. Now, this got news from both sides of the aisle. People who are really excited about the advance of the algorithms, and other people who are really concerned for the state of art. What does it mean when we take art and say a machine can win? A machine created that. A machine has value in a community that is usually defined by the inherent creativity of human beings. This creates a really interesting discussion with a lot of tension around it. And even more so when you think that it's not just available to an artist who has access, but to you and me. These tools are now available to anyone who wants to use them. They're open source and they're accessible. And you can see some of the things that people are doing with them. These are literally prompts that people have written. Panda with chef's hat rolling out pie dough. Corgi with bucket hat and sunglasses in Times Square. These are things that people will type into a box and all of a sudden pops right outside the algorithm. So it's being distributed to the world. Think of that. 15 years ago, you had to carry a bulky camera to record something, and you couldn't really upload it in many places. And now you can literally type a few words into your device and have something come out on the other end that looks pretty close to what you're looking for. It's absolutely incredible. So we'll talk about how this happens, where there's a really impressive algorithm that, just kidding. We're not going to talk about all that. I am going to give a basic explanation of how this works. Essentially, you train these algorithms on two elements and give it an understanding of the images and an understanding of the text. We talked about that training of the algorithms for machine vision earlier. Essentially, it's learning both about language and about imagery. And in that space in between, it's learning about things like aesthetics, style, different types of media, different objects, and it's creating these variables and dimensions that it measures to understand what you're actually looking to create. And many of these have hundreds and hundreds of dimensions. Now, humans can't really visually perceive beyond 3 dimensions, but when it comes to graphing a lot of these variables on graphs, there are 400, 500 dimensions in these algorithms. And then once it has an understanding of both language and imagery, then we start to test it. And we say, this is an image of a cat. And then we add what's called noise to the image. And we see if the algorithm can still understand that that's an image of a cat. It gets progressively harder, and it doesn't always succeed, but it takes some time. And then once it figures out that's an image of a cat, we make it harder. Can you still tell this is an image of a cat? Well, you and I would probably have a hard time figuring that one out, but the machines get really good at figuring this out. And then finally, we get to a ton of noise, and the machines can still tell that's an image of a cat. I certainly can't. So this is how it starts to understand it. For it to generate it, it does the opposite. It starts with a bunch of noise, and then it progressively enhances that image until you get something that looks like this. It's called diffusion. And it's basically taking its learning process in reverse and creating something for you. It's absolutely incredible to watch. But what's happening with all of this, when we're generating this art, when we're creating things from prompts instead of relying on humans to take the photo, to draw with their pencils, to create with an art brush, what it's doing is it's taking away a lot of that process to generate the art. And instead of us being the ones that are technically capable and processing the work, we become producers. We're directing where that technology is going and what it's doing, rather than being the one to do it. There's a little bit of disintermediation, but it changes the focus of the art, of the work. And this is a really important debate, because this also gets to the idea of what creativity is. And we'll talk about that more in a moment, but this sets up a conversation about creativity being an inherently human trait, but what if it is copyable? There's a lot to unpack there. But it's not just about taking things away, it's about giving us powers. We can say this is the end of photography, this is the end of art, this is the end of that. Well, I ask you, did the photography kill portraits? Did photography kill oil painting? Did the calculator kill mathematicians? Not really. It made a lot of their job easier and abstracted a lot of the work they would normally do, but they're still solving problems. They're still focusing on strategy, on getting things that require a lot of creative thinking. More and more of that will also be abstracted out as well, but it's not killing the process, it's augmenting it. And for us, there are beautiful elements of this because it makes people who aren't artistically inclined more expressive. If you can communicate with your words what you want to see in the world, you can create it currently in a two-dimensional form. Now, if you're an artist, it takes on completely different capabilities, because what you can do is use your prompts and your knowledge of the medium to create incredibly realistic and specific creations. These prompts I talk about respond to things like context and specific elements, types of directors, types of artists, types of mediums, references like ArtStation, Unreal Engine, all start to give the machine an understanding of what you want to produce. And by your knowledge of that, you can get a better prompt. So this is an example of what's called a prompt helper. Being able to get comfortable with creating this stuff requires that you have an understanding of what you're looking for. And these things will tell you how to get there. So you can click on each one and say, what kind of style are you looking for? You'll select a style. I want it to be in the style of impressionist art. Cool, okay. Lighting, what kind of lighting do you want? Bright, dark, diffuse, sunny day, dark room? What kind of camera might you want to be using for this? It's almost like you're creating an entire production studio within the mind of a machine by using text. Artists here, you can say, I want it to be done in the style of Salvador Dali. or colors. You can actually prescribe the types of colors you want to be in this. You have complete control of so many different variables. Again, it's taking away the actual act of doing, but not of thinking and of constructing. So an unexpected benefit of this is that for the people that are using it, it's forcing them to actively engage and study the media and the culture of that medium, understanding different directors of different types of movies, the style of different artists, the things that were relevant in specific cultures. This may not be an artistic pursuit, but it's one that helps us understand the sociology and anthropology that were relevant to those styles. So in order to create with simply words, you actually have to understand what made that so in the first place. So while a lot of the press has been focused on this is taking away art as we know it, what they're missing entirely is that it requires active engagement with the art and with the culture. The next thing I want to talk about is creativity itself. Can we be creative, and can machines even be creative? And I would argue that machines can be creative. There are some people who completely disagree. Some people say that the defining characteristic of what it is to be human is creativity, and that there is nothing else on the planet that can match that. No animal, no machine. But if you break down, and if you're reductive about what creativity is, kind of leaning on how we broke down the information from machine vision, creativity in its simplest form often is two things that don't belong together in a current or existing paradigm or context, and finding a way to make them make sense in a new one, a way that shifts your way of thinking, a way that shifts the way you perceive those two objects. And essentially, it creates a remix. Everything is a remix. There's nothing that we can really conjure in our minds that hasn't existed in some form or another earlier. If you're painting in a certain style, well, you were looking at other artists and using that as inspiration for whatever you're creating now. Machines do the same thing. If you're creating something, you're using bits of inspiration from your history and your past. These are things that you have observed and experienced. And because of that experience, now you can create something from your context. You're shifting all of this data to create something new for someone else and for you. Machines do the same thing, just at world scale in a much shorter period of time. And this is actually at the center of a lot of conversation. If we learn the same way, the difference is I can go to so many museums in my life, have so many experiences, and it still takes me years to figure out how all this is going to become part of my art. But machines can do that in mere days and months. So it's not exactly fair. That I agree. The other is, how do machines create art? Can they actually create art? Now, I did what every high school language teacher tells you not to do, and I refer to Wikipedia. And they say it's a diverse range of human activity resulting in a product that involves creative or imaginative talent, expressing technical proficiency, beauty, emotional power, or conceptual ideas. If you break that down, machines have most of that down. So yes, they can create art, but are they artists? Very debatable. Now, what is this going to do in terms of jobs, in terms of destroying society? Well, it really won't be taking away jobs of designers and artists who have to solve really challenging problems. But what it will do is it will take away a lot of work from places like gig working, places that are already in an international race to the bottom of pricing, things where I can go on and get a logo for $125, or in some cases, $50. This is the work that is going to be most at risk from things like image generation. So there is going to be some job destruction while there's going to be additional job creation from things like algorithms and data selection. I'll talk about that right now. The next generation of these are going to be localized and personalized. What I mean by that is these data sets are predominantly based on American culture, and they're based on data sets that are not exactly representative of each individual country. And several of these companies are working with individual governments to say, let's create a data set based on your language, your culture, your country, so that you can see how this would work for you and individualize it to references that are relevant to your history. The next iteration is going to be personalized. That means you and I will have our own personalized algorithms that understand our context, who we are, our histories, our past, our preferences, to create for us. Whether that's art or whether that's experience is yet to be seen. But there are some challenges that come with that. And the data sets that feed these machines matter a lot. And there's a problem with that, because the data sets are often opaque. They don't tell us what's in them. Or if they do, we find things like this. The data sets themselves are rife with problems, pornography, all sorts of horrible stereotypes about people, incredibly charged language, and very specific depictions of things that should not be reproduced. But that's in the data sets. And that has been so for quite some time. And if we're going to take this technology and make it important to our everyday lives in ways that are pervasive, this is something we need to be spending a lot of time talking about and fixing. Otherwise, we're building on a shaky foundation that can cause problems and will cause problems in the future. We already see this having issues of bias in terms of the way that it predicts things like predictive policing and the way that it is used to determine whether people get certain privileges or not. You take this into the world of creation and art, you have similar problems. Going back to the element of creation, though, next is audio, music, 3D. It's not just about two-dimensional imagery. It's about so much more than that. And this is where we get some really wild stuff. What if I could take this technology and change the video of whatever this is going to be and have it done in a completely different setting? Well, here's an example of a partnership between Runway.ml and Midjourney, or Stability. And you can use that same prompt technology I was talking about and change the context in which she's playing his game of tennis. What the machine is doing is it's understanding the object of the tennis player, it's occluding him, and then it's putting him on top of a layer that it can manipulate. And it understands that you wouldn't find those barriers on a volcano or in Mars. It understands which structures are human-made, what's man-made, what's natural to the space. It's making all these decisions in real time, frame by frame, to create new video. And it gets even better because it's not just about creating video, but it's about using natural interfaces. For most of us, creating really high-quality video is just completely out of our skill set. It's not something we spent years learning how to do. The tools are very difficult, steep learning curves, and it's not something that feels natural to work with. Well, this same technology can fix that. Generate a lush garden. Okay, well, now what do I want to do with it? Let's give it a Ken Burns scale in. I want to put a title there. And then here, you're just saying, I want to actually exclude this character and give him a different background. It's just using prompts. There's no file menus. There's no specific knowledge of how layers work. It's just using what you know how to do and say, I want this. And it gives it to you. So all of this helps us not just understand how to create and have the machine do it for us, but how to collaborate using these natural interfaces, the one that's most natural to us and our language. No mouse, no files, no interface, just your voice or a keyboard. So that's two-dimensional, that's video. We've talked about imagery. What about projecting onto the world around us? What about the metaverse? What about what Rish and Martin were talking about a little bit ago? All of that's going to require enormous amounts of power to create, and we don't have enough 3D modelers and 3D experts to create all that for us. We're going to have to rely on the machines to help us out with that. So let me show you an example of what that looks like.
Okay, computer, I'd like a corn-themed wallpaper. No, corn on the cob in a tiling pattern. Yeah, okay. Need something else to make it interesting. Let's stylize it and add some pink flowers. Yeah, perfect. Can we make it bigger? Yeah, great. Cool, let's buy it.
This is a prototype from Shopify. Now, it's just a prototype, but those technologies are exactly as you see them in the video. You can actually use those prompts to generate the imagery. The computer knows what is the wall and what's not, and it knows how to project that image onto the wall and then make adjustments as the operator requests them. And then you can buy it. One more example.
Can I get a raccoon here in space? As a painting? In a Hawaiian shirt with sunglasses, eating a pizza. No, here. Perfect.
Let's buy it. So we've gone from machines understanding the world to creating 3D models, to creating art, and now creating things that we can buy. Ultimately, there will be no barrier between expression, consumption, or commerce. Whatever you really want to create, you will have a way to do that. And the machines will help you do that. Again, the machines and the algorithms themselves have plenty of things we need to work out if we're going to make sure they're going to be as big a part of our lives as they are going to be. But the creative potential that they enable us to have is absolutely profound. So I hope, as I started in the beginning, I said we're going to save the world or destroy it with algorithms. Hopefully I've convinced you that we're going to be saving the world, not destroying it. Machines will be helping us and not taking everything over, and that we have an optimistic future, but one that we have to work for, not one that's going to be handed to us. So with that, I'll leave it to my friends, the machines, to take us out.
Ian's right. We're not here to take over the world or even your jobs.
And the Hollywood narrative often paints us as malicious.
But the things that we can create together are just starting to reveal themselves.
And you can do things you aren't capable of doing on your own. By the time it's all said and done, it'll be hard to tell if you're one of us or we're one of you.
We'll be working so much together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and stay with us for a while. Yes, I think we can all agree that it was a fantastic piece of what fake news and the whole new world that is happening in front of us now can do. So I have plenty of questions, but I think everyone wants to know what's the dark side of it.
Yes. So the most important part, there are two elements that I think people should be thinking about consistently. And one is, what is the source of the data that I mentioned earlier? There are massive problems with the data sets. And there's, in my opinion, an important job that is going to be coming from this that hasn't existed in the past. A lot of technologies create new jobs that didn't exist, is people who are responsible for curating algorithms. Right now, there are people who work for the Googles and the Microsofts of the world who are responsible for taking and creating these data sets. And then these data sets are used over and over and over and over again. Unfortunately, a lot of them have been used unquestioningly. They become the gold standard and everyone starts to use them. But when you look deep inside, you see all of the problems that come from the studies that you saw there. And there has to be a much larger discussion about what it is to create these types of data sets that all these algorithms are going to be based off of. So more and more people will be involved in this. I think that field in particular is going to experience an explosion in the number of people invested in it, and also the tool sets to help us create much more representative data sets that include everyone, that don't exclude people, and that also don't create bias. People often look at algorithms as a source of truth. They're not. Algorithms are opinions about what's important embedded in code. And those opinions come from human beings. We have our own issues. So that is often applied to code, and that gets amplified when you bring technology into it. Technology amplifies all of human characteristics, the good and the bad, so you get both.
Yeah, another question that comes to my mind, which is not maybe very obvious, but for me it's a personal one, because my daughter is 12. So what should we learn? What kind of education we should put in the mainstream to teach them to be a part of this kind of world?
Yeah.
Fast.
Very fast. I think the most important part for people to experience and learn here is the education system itself is going to rapidly evolve because we still have an industrial education system. William O'Brien says that we as humans have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. He's right, we do. And this, unfortunately, the education system is part of that medieval system. Not really medieval, but industrial. And it just doesn't work for the way that society operates today, especially given the exponential pace at which it's going to work. So I would say work with the tools, experiment, and prototype. Prototyping and experimentation is going to be more important than ever before because that application of that knowledge is what teaches you how to interface with these. And then those patterns can serve you for the next evolution of the technology. But to think that we can go to school and then be done with education, I mean, that's something we've said for a long time is not going to be sufficient for participating in society. And now it's not going to be anywhere near sufficient if you want to maintain relevance in a society that's moving as fast as it is.
That's true.
Okay, I have a question here. Which of the emerging technologies do you think will be the most influential in the years ahead? That's quite a general question, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
your perspective.
I think, artificial intelligence is the big one that's taking over everything, and it's well, I wouldn't say taking over everything, but it's embedded in almost everything we're using today. I would have to say that, what's happening with the metaverse is incredible. It is going to change the way that we interact with the world around us, both digital and physical. And that those two terms actually tell us a lot about where we are in the state of things with technology. We refer to technology as digital and physical right now. And those realities are going to extend manyfold from digital, physical, extended realities, virtual realities, immersive realities, to this spectrum that we're going to exist within. And artificial intelligence, machine vision, 3D, augmented reality, those are all rushing together to create this new ultimate reality that we live in. It's going to be a lot very quickly. And our language betrays where we are with technology. The way you talk about it tells us where we are on the adoption curve. There's a great quote from Mossberg that says, I don't go and say, would you like me to go on the electrical grid and make you some toast? Not how we operate today. But if we take a look at the way we talk about digital and physical, it's very similar to that statement looking back 5 years from today. So I would say those are the things I'm really interested in.
Yeah, and maybe some controversial question. Do you think, because this technology helps us a lot and will help us even more, and we do a lot of things for us and replace us with many like everyday tasks, do you think this, in a bit longer perspective, will make humanity smarter or more stupid?
Both. Both. It goes back to that idea that technology amplifies human capability and characteristics, and we have a great tendency to be incredibly lazy when we want to, which we always want to be. But I think it has the capability to do both. Whatever you choose to do with it, that will be magnified. There will be some creative destruction and some destruction of jobs. This AI will get even better and better and better at producing and abstract more and more of these processes away from doing the work. And I do believe that there is a world in which we will consider AI not just a collaborator, but an independent entity unto itself that can create without our input. You think about that for a second. That's AI creating code or creating art with no human input whatsoever. That becomes another entity that's essentially walking the earth with us. That creates another division of society and societal labor in many ways. And that, I think, is a really interesting discussion that is an entirely different thing on its own. But yes, I do think that there's a lot to come from this that will do both.
It's something we should think about. And thank you very much, Ian. Thank you for now. I think you can catch Ian on a break.